Hey everybody, so in a recent video, I kind of told my story about my journey into becoming an independent contractor as an occupational therapist. And there were some great responses to the video, and a lot of you wanted to know a few more details about basically how that happened. Like, what were the steps that I took in order to become an independent contractor and what all is involved with getting to that step. So in this video, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be breaking down the steps that you need to do and keep in mind in order for you to transition from being an employee to being an independent contractor. So step number one is to make up in your mind that you actually want to take this journey into becoming an independent contractor. So you definitely need to sit down with yourself and ask yourself, like, why is it that I want to be an independent contractor? Like, why do you want to go from being an employee to actually being kind of independent and being on your own? So there are definitely pros and cons, just depending on how you look at it with both things, right? So whether you decide that you want to stay an employee, there's pros and cons. If you want to become an independent contractor, there's pros and cons. So it's up to you to weigh out what pros and what cons benefit you and work best for your lifestyle. So I'll just give you some brief examples as to why I made that transition very quickly, because if you want to learn all about that, go ahead and watch the most recent video I did when I talked a little bit more about that journey and why I did what I did. But just to give you a brief example, one of the reasons why I made that decision to take that leap into becoming an independent contractor is for flexibility and freedom with my schedule and time, right? So that was just one of the pros that stood out to me. So I definitely highly encourage you all to go down and make a list and just write out the pros and cons, right? And really make up in your mind that this is something you want to do. And if you decide that, yes, this is something that I definitely want to do, I know that I want to be an independent contractor, then let's move on to step number two. So one thing to consider and ask yourself is, when you do become an independent contractor, what type of setting do you want to work in? Do you want to work in pediatrics? Do you want to work in skilled nursing facilities? Do you want to work for schools, hospitals, whatever the case may be? So there are a few different avenues that you can go when you become an independent contractor. So one thing you can do is you can basically become a contractor where you contract your services out to an agency or private clinic or private facility or just other facilities in general. So basically you would connect with that agency and you guys would come up with a contract and the terms and the pay and all of that. And you would basically be providing your services through that agency as an independent contractor. Or you can take the route where you are just completely independent on your own. And this is more so kind of like, in a sense, starting your own practice. So you can start your own mobile practice, or you can even start your own like brick and mortar practice. And that is something completely different in itself. So in this video, we're kind of focusing on just being an independent contractor, not necessarily starting your own like brick and mortar business. But if you decide like, hey, I don't want to necessarily work for an agency, I just want to be an independent contractor where I contract my services, I do my own billing, that is something else that is definitely a possibility. Now you need to actually do some research and figure out if you're gonna go the agency route at least, or even if you're going the completely private route, is there even a need for your contractual services in the area that you see yourself working in? So you may need to go on, do some Google researches, you may have to go on LinkedIn, you may have to go on Indeed, and you may just have to do some research out there to see like what is actually available. Are there companies actually looking for contracted occupational therapy services? For example, I work in early intervention and I work through an agency. So I contract my services with an agency that is affiliated with my state's early intervention program. And so I am basically on board with them. They provide me with all the admin work. They do all of my billing. They take care of all of that. Basically, I am just in charge of selecting which clients I want to work with, depending on, if it matches with my schedule. And and I'm in charge of making up my own schedule and just keeping up with my reports and documentation and things of that nature. So next, you need to figure out if you want to continue on as a sole proprietor, meaning that you are just an independent contractor, you're not incorporated as a business of any kind, or if you want to actually incorporate yourself as a business and become like an LLC, right? And so you could go either way. The sole proprietor is the very simple route. However, it is kind of the more riskier route, only because if you are providing services under your direct name and not your business, then if somebody, let's say, God forbid, somebody wants to sue you, they're coming directly to you. They're not suing your business. They're coming after your assets, your personal things that you have going on. And so incorporating yourself as an LLC or starting your independent contracting services under a business versus just being a sole proprietor is going to protect you a lot more. And another benefit of becoming an LLC are all the tax perks and tax benefits that you may receive. Which brings me to my next point. Something that you should know if you do decide to become an independent contractor is that your taxes are not automatically taken out for you as they would be if you were an employee. With being an independent contractor, you are responsible for paying taxes on your own. So it's highly, highly, highly recommended that you find a CPA or a certified public accountant who can help you manage your taxes. Now, I just want to put it out there. Don't just go find any old kind of like accountant, right? You need a CPA, a certified public accountant, who is, I highly recommend you find one that is a tax strategist, right? So the difference is, so you know how like around what, January, February, some of you may go to like H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt or some of those really quick fly-by-night like tax places to get your taxes done. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an individual who has studied the law. They know the taxes in and out. They know all the different strategies, because the difference is the tax strategist is going to work with you to help you save as much money as possible. And they're going to try to work with you and help you figure out how to save on your taxes so that you're not paying out so much at the end of the year, or you're not paying out so much during those quarterly tax dues, depending on what your tax schedule looks like. So you definitely want to find a tax strategist. You can just maybe Google in your local area, maybe call a few CPAs and just ask them some questions, interview them, and just kind of get to know them and get to know their services and what they offer. And that way you can kind of start narrowing down like who would be a good fit for you. They're going to advise you on things that you can write off on your taxes. They're going to advise you on your tax deductions. They're going to advise you on things such as if you should stay in LLC or if you should become an S Corp, right? Because that's a whole nother tax classation. So these are individual things that, depending on the trajectory of your business, depending on where you see yourself going with your business, depending on how much money you make in your business, all of that is going to determine your taxes and how all that works together. So definitely do some research on the accountants or the CPAs before you just pick anybody. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is a way to keep track of your expenses, right? Some people may use things like QuickBooks. I've heard of something called Waze. Some people even use an Excel spreadsheet. It all depends, right? I highly recommend that you start figuring out what you're gonna use to track all of your expenses, because that's gonna be crucial when it's tax time. You wanna know what you can deduct. You wanna know what went in, what came out, and all of that. And some of the things that you can write off, which is kind of like a benefit of being an independent contractor, especially if you're like an OT, you can write off things such as your supplies that you have to purchase. Like me, I'm an OT that works in EI, so I'm traveling from house to house to house. So I can write off my mileage that I use. I can write off, if you have an office space that you use just specifically for your business, you can write off some of the things associated with that. So maybe a portion of your rent, maybe your utilities, maybe your phone bill, and the list goes on. So like I said, keep in mind, taxes are a huge thing. So you want to have somebody who's very good and knowledgeable about all of that. So another thing that you're gonna have to get as an independent contractor is an EIN number. So an EIN number is kind of like a social security number, but for your business. So it's how your business is going to be identified when you do your taxes or when you sign up for different programs or whatever the case may be. But you have to have an EIN number in place. It is free to get and it takes like 5 minutes to do it. Once you have your LLC and then you have your EIN number, the next thing that you're gonna wanna do is set up your business bank account. And this is super important because you definitely wanna keep your personal finances separate from your business finances. So that way, when it comes time to file taxes, you're not like all over the place. So the next step after you have gotten your LLC, you have your accountant in place, you have your business bank account, your EIN and all of that, now you are going to want to look into liability insurance. So because you are independent, you want insurance and liability insurance to protect yourself and protect your business. And so definitely look into see what liability insurance is out there that will help cover exactly what you do. So you may have to speak to an insurance company or an underwriter or whatever the case may be to describe exactly what you're doing, and they will be able to help you figure out which professional liability insurance works best for you. Now I get mine through something called HPSO, I think it's called, like Healthcare Provider Service Organization, and I can leave the link to that below this video, but that is basically who I've been getting my basically that's who I've been getting my professional liability insurance through since I became an independent contractor. And you pay like a yearly fee for that. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head what that yearly fee is. It may be a few hundred, but I mean, you only pay it once a year, so it comes out to not being that big of a deal, especially if you divide it out by 12 months. So you'll need to definitely keep that in mind and go ahead and get you that professional liability insurance before you get started actually working as an independent contractor. So another question that I commonly get is about benefits, because as we all know, if you are working as an independent contractor, you are no longer getting those healthcare benefits through your company. And so it is possible. I don't want you guys to think that it's not possible to still get some type of benefits for yourself if you are considering becoming an independent contractor. So I'm just gonna tell you guys just a few options or things that you can look into. So one is the ACA, or the Affordable Care Act. You can go to the ACA marketplace online and just look up some healthcare options that's out there. Now, this is also known as like the Affordable Care Act or the Obamacare, but this allows you to kind of pick through and look to see which healthcare plans are affordable for you and which ones can you afford on a monthly basis to kind of cover whatever your personal needs are. Now, there may be some of you out there who have very minimal needs when it comes to like healthcare. Some of you may only go to the doctor like once a year for a checkup, and that's really it. So you don't necessarily need a plan that's like super expensive, right? You can look kind of for like the bare minimal, but you definitely want to just make sure whatever plan you go with, it covers exactly what you need it to cover. So another option is something called SHOP. SHOP stands for Small Business Health Options Program. So basically this is another type of marketplace, but it's specifically for small business owners or self-employed individuals or independent contractors. And so basically you would go to healthcare.gov, look into their SHOP program to see what options there are and to see if you qualify. And I'll leave the link for that below as well. And another option, especially let's say you're just getting started, you don't have a lot of income right now, is to look into your local, like the Medicaid options, and see what is out there that may benefit you. So I don't want you to get discouraged because there are options out there. You just kind of got to do a little bit more research and more digging, especially nowadays, because there are so many entrepreneurs and individuals that are self-employed or contractors. They are starting to realize this, and so there are starting to be a little bit more options on the marketplace for individuals like us. So definitely look into those options. Now, let's say you also is somebody like me who's blind, right? You can't really see without your contacts or your glasses, but you don't really have a whole lot of money to spend on like visual insurance. Then you can also look into some local eye care programs that may be near you. So for example, I go to this place called America's Best, and America's Best, I think it's called like eyeglasses and contacts or something of that nature. But basically they have super affordable plans where you can basically pay out of pocket for maybe like an eye exam. It might be like $100, or sometimes I believe the exams themselves are free, but then you have to pay like $100 to be in like their healthcare club. With the eye care club, then you would get your vision exams for free, but then of course you have to pay for your contacts or your glasses. And then also dental is another thing some of you may need to consider. Like for me, for example, I only go to the dentist twice a year for my annual or biannual cleanings, and so I don't need like the most expensive dental plan because I don't have like braces or caps or anything like that. So you can look into something called like Delta Dental, and they provide different options for like dental plans as well. And so needless to say, I could go on and on, but moral of the story is do your research, because there are options out there. If you are self-employed or independent contractor, you can still get the benefits and the healthcare coverage that you need. Just takes a little bit of research and a little bit of digging to do so. And whatever options I come across, I'll link those below for you guys. So another thing that people often ask me about is marketing when it comes to being an independent contractor. And marketing, and honestly, it just depends on which route you decide to go with independent contracting. So for me, for example, I am contracted through an agency, and I also am contracted with a private clinic. And so I don't necessarily have to do a lot of marketing myself, because the agency and the clinic, they've already done their own marketing, and so they already have clients for me. I'm just going there to pick up clients or provide services for the clients that the agencies and the clinic already has in place. But if you are somebody who is starting off from scratch, like you're gonna be a complete independent contractor, you're doing your own billing, your own marketing, your own everything, then marketing is something you wanna consider. And so if you're going that route where you're just completely on your own, just kind of starting from scratch, then you may want to consider things like, make sure you have your resume up to date, maybe having like a up to date LinkedIn profile, some up to date like social media marketing out there. You can go on websites such as like Google or Indeed, and look to see in your local area like who may be interested or who's hiring for like contracting type services. You may even have to do some in-person, like face-to-face visits, maybe talk with the person who's in charge of the contracting services. You may want to drop off your brochures or your business cards or your bio, make some phone calls, do some deliveries. You may have to use a combination of different types of marketing, whether, like I said, it's in person, whether it's some digital marketing, some social media marketing, going through LinkedIn, and just connecting with your local programs even. So looking into different park district programs, connecting with, let's say you want to work with children, right? Going to maybe different school programs or different local community programs, and just kind of getting your name out there and like talking to people and let them know what you do, because you never know who's networked or who is connected to who, and sometimes just getting your name out there and what it is that you do may lead to you landing some contracts and connecting with that right individual. So guys, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you now kind of understand a little bit more about what it takes to get into place in order to make that transition from being an employee to being an independent contractor. And I know it may sound overwhelming and it may sound like it's a lot, but if you break it down into baby steps, kind of like I did, and you just take things one step at a time, one check mark at a time, you will eventually get there, and then you can start your journey as an independent contractor. I personally love it. I love the flexibility of it. I love being able to just kind kind of make my own schedule and just kind of calling the shots in a sense, if you know what I mean. So I definitely think that it's beneficial if that's something you are considering. And like I said, go through these steps. Do as much research as you possibly can before diving into it. And if you have any additional questions about it, or any comments, or any other topics that you want me to talk more about when it comes to being an OT, or being an OT as an entrepreneur, or OT as an independent contractor, whatever the case may be, leave your questions, leave your comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. All right, guys. And like I said, if you have not watched the video about my journey into becoming an independent contractor and my underlying, my why, which I talked about as the first step that you guys should consider, then go back and watch that video as well. All right, guys, till the next one. Bye.